Robert Moore. Again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation between this interdisciplinary conversation between Robert Moore and Khalik Allah. Thank you both for joining us. It's we're here on the occasion of Flex and also on the occasion of Khalik's film, which was screened at Film Scene this Thursday. His two films that were screened at Film Scene on Thursday. Incredible, powerful films. We're going to see excerpts from one of those films, Black Mother, during the course of our conversation. I could begin as these things typically begin. I could read their bios. Robert Moore I could tell you that he's this famous artist who a lot of celebrities are collecting, Taraji P. Henson. I could go on, and I could say the same about Khalik, this filmmaker, photographer who's doing all these wonderful things and has the stamp of approval from, the Sundance Institute. I could do that. But I thought we'd start with a little bit of interesting tidbits about each of them, One. How many of us know this? How many of you know that it's Robert Moore's work? Just today. Just today. This is a work by Robert. So I'm hoping you could tell us a little bit about how it originated, the ideas behind the work, because has become a major part of Iowa City lore, It's very much a part of the fabric of the city. And I think it's important that we contextualize it by first letting people know that you are the artist behind it, and also just for you to share a little bit about your experience of this work with us. You can, and I think it's on. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Feels like it's not working, but if you can hear me like more than my regular voice, I'll just keep going. All right. I think this was the first mural I ever did. I'm not a big fan of heights, so this is the only project I've done that high since then. I don't know if it's so much the heights, but it was during the year 2020. It seemed like there was an insurgence of attention on some of our challenges, the disparities that we face as a black community. And there seemed to be an authentic and an inauthentic call for attention from other communities outside the black community. And I say that because I don't really get any public funding. I've never got anybody saying they're gonna give me money to do what I do outside of me doing something first and then selling it. So there's like a belief and like a faith behind that when someone can write you a check and say, do your thing. That was one of those rare situations where I had the opportunity to do that. And anytime I'm given an opportunity to paint or create something on canvas, especially in a public setting, I'm always trying to amplify those things that aren't as amplified. I spent 7 years in Iowa City, so I'm pretty familiar with the landscape, specifically with the west side of Iowa City and the African population, the immigrant population. So I thought it'd be cool to like portray two black women of African descent, similarly as I saw some of the Sudanese and the Somalians here in Iowa City. So, especially during 2020, wanting to amplify our people, amplify some of our stories. I think this is the largest or tallest mural in Iowa City. So I have a lot of pride knowing that it's two black women staring over on the north side of Iowa City. So that was really the history behind that. I haven't received any funding, not even a conversation about it since then. I'm not here to ask for funding. That's not why I'm bringing it up. I guess it's kind of cool when it happens, but I still sit back and say, man, I don't really know if it happened for the right reasons, because I feel like it was to protect a building owned by a white man. So then it didn't become a target for some of the things that we were targeting to try to get our voices heard. So it's up there, though. So I'm proud of that. I did it for the right reasons, and I got a little money for it, which is rare. So I guess in that order, I would have did it for free.
Thank you. Thank you. Khalik, who's that?
Oh, snap, man. Look at this.
Is that on? Yeah.
Yo, yeah, it's working. Damn,
So this is Khalik at 12 years old. Filmmaker, photographer now, but at 12 years old, it seems like you were somebody else. Khalik, can you tell us a little bit about that?
those were the b-boy days. You know, those were the breakdancing days. You know, that's the teen club. You know, try to get a little dance with a girl, a little feel on her. Just 13, 12 maybe. You know what I'm saying? That's me in the club really high as a kid. You know what I'm saying? Just to keep it real. But hip hop is part of my life, and breakdancing is a pillar of hip hop. So, you know, I grew up that way. Obviously, this was around the time that I got left back, and that's kind of what impelled me to become a filmmaker. So I appreciate this time, you know, even though it was a wild time. You know, if you ever seen the movie Kids by Larry Clark, that's kind of how we grew up, you know.
And you know, you also have a history with the Wu-Tang Clan. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, that came much later, but I was a big fan of the Wu-Tang since maybe, I don't know, 10 years old. You know, GZA's Liquid Swords album was the first album I ever bought. And, you know, we later became really good friends, and we play a lot of chess together. Those brothers, you know, I grew up with something called the 5% Nation, and that's similar to the Nation of Islam. So studying with that, they study the same thought system. So, you know, I was sharp with my lessons when I was, you know, going through that. And we met in Harlem, and from there, it wasn't even really about being a fan or about rap. It was really about the knowledge we were studying.
You know what I find interesting about both of you? You know, we are here at the University of Iowa. The University of Iowa prides itself on a lot of things, you know, as it should, you know. And one of the things that this university prides itself on is the fact that this is where the MFA originated. The Masters in Fine Arts originated at this institution. And we're in an era where a lot of artists writ large, writers, painters, filmmakers, photographers, etc., feel the need to pursue an MFA, become professionalized. They feel like that's how to make it. Guilty as charged, you know. But I find it very interesting that both of you are self-taught. You're both self-taught artists. And I'd just love to hear a little bit about your journey to becoming these successful, lauded artists that each of you is. If I could start with you, Robert.
Yeah. I dropped out of, I didn't drop out, got my GED because I wanted to join the military, because I was already raised by military parents at age 17. So after my junior year, I joined the military because I was like, well, I might as well have a stranger yelling at me, because I already had my dad treat me like a drill sergeant. Ended up being the same. But I lived in Iowa City for like 7 years, and I signed up for community college, Kirkwood. I didn't really go to class, and I ended up getting a job and hustling, honestly hustling everywhere I could, like literally everywhere. I've been arrested in this town a few times. And I kind of reflect back now, because given everything that I think I thought I missed out on, it was really setting me up for where I'm at now. And I didn't really ever take a straight line in anything. I just, whether it was being hard-headed or just wanting to see what was around the corner, I took these real curvy paths through life, even up until today. And so it was about throughout those years, Iowa City was actually one of the areas I inherited some great memories, some not so great memories, but also some alcoholism, some drug addiction from partying. And I actually left this town, and I love this town. But as a young man, I left this town because I thought I was always going to be a boy. And I could never go from like college party persona to like man. So I left, and I continued with those addictions through different careers, even into early stages of fatherhood. And so at the end of 2019, I decided to get sober from drugs and alcohol, and I was really bored, and I was scared of having an idle mind and having that put me right back down the path of addiction and alcoholism. So I picked up a paintbrush, and it wasn't like love at first sight or magic on canvas right away. There was a lot of mistakes, but I did it every day just like I used to drink and use every day. And I was like, well, I might as well just try to practice every day, because after a whole year of doing it every day, I got really good. Really good. I say that humbly. There's a lot of other people that validated how good I got, but I actually understand it now.
Lots of movie stars.
Yeah, people that I've looked up to were validating my work. And so independently, I look at things probably similar to you, I approach my practice like music and hip hop. Music and hip hop are the foundation of my entire practice. And so it's really interesting to hear you talk too, because I grew up as a younger child in the inner city. My parents moved to the suburbs in high school. I went into survival mode. There was no one wearing baggy clothes. There was no one interested in hip hop. There was no one that was really good at street ball. So the only people I really connected with were the skateboarders. And these were white boys, but they were skateboarders. And I was like, oh, y'all like Wu-Tang? Y'all like Gravediggers? I was like, oh, so like that was my survival group. And so hearing you talk about that and hearing where I'm at now, all of that is foundational for how I approach my practice, because I approach it like hip hop, not only for my business and understanding and hearing the greats before me saying, own your masters, don't sign to a label, and me being like, oh, maybe I shouldn't run and try to jump in bed with an art gallery right away. Maybe I should see what this path, even though it's not easy, what being an independent artist looks like. Maybe I can take some of this corporate experience, which I thought was hell, being in corporate America. Maybe I can take some of this corporate experience and monetize my practice and develop a practice that breaks the stereotypes of what I was hearing from the struggling artists. That's what motivates me to stay independent. And I'm a black man. I tell people this story. If my plantation owner, my slave owner, let me go, let me free, no matter how hungry I was or broke I was, I would not go back knocking on that door for a job. I'd rub some sticks together. I'd find a little patch, a corner in a field, and I'd make my freedom work. That's what being an independent artist for me is it's making the freedom work and making the work. And what comes out of that isn't always riches, but there's a freedom that you can't put a price tag on.
Khalik?
I think just meeting you today, we got so many similarities in our story and how we got into the field that we're in. So again, man, it's an honor to be meeting you and speaking here, because it sounded like painting kind of became like a therapy for you. And for me, that's what filmmaking is. That's what photography is for me. When I was 13, I got left back in 8th grade, and my family is a well-educated family. You know, my mother's from Jamaica. You know, her mother was a school teacher. You know, my father is from Iran, so I'm coming from immigrant parents who are expecting so much as well. And then to get left back, it's because when you see that, you know, I was in nightclubs until 3 a.m. on a Wednesday. So school on Thursday, I'm canceling that, you know. But after getting left back and seeing your friends, especially if it's 8th grade and your friends are going into high school and you got to stay in the middle school, I was like, yo, I just want an outlet to express myself. And I begged my mother for a camera, and she got me a Hi8 cassette tape camera. You know, these were the days before everybody had a cell phone where they had a video camera on it. So it was a big deal. And, you know, my brothers were into graffiti, and I was the lookout man. I was also filming them doing graffiti. I used to skateboard as well, and actually skateboarders put me on the Wu-Tang. So, you know, again, another similarity. But you know, it became an outlet of expression because, you know, I wasn't able to rap, even though a lot of my friends told me I sound like a rapper. I was like, nah, I'm not, I can't write like that. And graffiti, I didn't have any skills, painting skills. So the camera felt natural to me as like an extension of myself. And, you know, it's taken me through a lot of dark times as well because it's a constant. It's a constant relationship that, you know, never goes away. And it's actually something that I love to do. So it never feels like work, even though I've gotten into like the commercial industry and doing work just for money, essentially. I still love doing that too. But yeah, if I'm away from my camera for a while, I feel like there's a part of my mind which hasn't been exercised. And, you know, yeah, I'll miss it.
You know, I'm hearing both of you talk about freedom, you know, the way in which your art sets you free in a way. And I want to move on to Robert, your installation in Flex. Flex, if you haven't seen Flex yet, guys, you should. It's we're here partly because of Flex, which is a show that I co-curated with my colleague Corey Gonlock is upstairs. We will have 30 minutes after this for you guys to quickly check it out. In fact, I think we might have even 20 minutes because we'll be kicked out. But please check out Flex, Masculinities and the Arts of Global Africa upstairs. This is an installation, a work by Robert that is featured in Flex. And I come back to this idea of freedom, Robert. I'm going to ask you a question that I've been asked a lot about your installation. You know, it's an installation that really tracks this journey from enslavement to being free to choose your destiny, being free to choose the labor that, you know, being put in a position to pursue the labor of your choice. And what I've been asked about is how you project the blue collar worker, suggesting that, because I think I know that for the people who have asked me this, they would expect that the white collar worker would be the one that you would perhaps choose to project because it, you know, it denotes this pinnacle of success, and yet it's in fact the blue collar worker that you choose for us to focus on, that you choose to amplify, and suggesting that perhaps he is the most free. And is that a fair assessment? In addition to that, I would just love to hear you speak about this work in the show generally, and where it began and how what inspired you to arrive here.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on. I'll expand on it, but one would assume, or I think most might assume or draw a conclusion that the white collar would be the higher stature, the more successful. It's almost like the adolescent view of how I viewed black men, the ones that had the suit and collar, and I was like, oh, those are the rich ones. Those are the successful ones. Those are the free ones. Then as I got older, I was like, wait, I've actually had that collar. I purchased it through some black market auction.
This is the slave collar.
The slave collar, yes. Something that I was like, I know this is part of my ancestors. I don't know if I really should own this, but from an art perspective, I need to put this out into the world. So then I started becoming obsessed with the term just collar. And I started thinking about dog collars, white collar, blue collar. And it started making me just toil on this term and how it translates between these different forms. And specifically what it means for us. And the slave collar is actually titled a no-sleep collar. So it's something that slave owners would put on slaves to make sure that they couldn't find a form of comfort, that they would have to literally stay awake and continue to stay in a place of labor or work. So when I think about flex and I think about global masculinities around Africans and African Americans or Black Americans, I think about how I viewed a black man, a free man, a strong man. And I started doing some of my research on how African cultures, different cultures, viewed a real man. What did masculinity mean for me? What did masculinity mean for my motherland, Africa? And there was a lot of similarities. It was around size and stature, size of family, and very importantly, your financial stature. Those are really what globally define a black man. And so then I started to think more, even deeper in the terms of slave, white collar, blue collar. And I started thinking of a house Negro and what that white collar probably originated as. And then I started thinking, man, this is a no sleep collar. But I've had a corporate job. I was very successful in the corporate world before I became an artist. And I've been hired for multiple jobs that were 40 hours a week with great salaries. But I'd work 50 hours, 60 hours some of those weeks. I'd brag about my salary. But if I really did the math, that 50, 60 hours made that salary a lot smaller because they were getting free hours over that 40 hours out of me. Ultimately, I realized when I was in those white collar occupations, I got less sleep. I was overworked. I was stressed even when I wasn't working because I wanted to make sure I kept my job. This is a perpetuated biological mentality, specifically in the black culture, because our slave owners used to treat us the exact same way. And from slave collars to slave patrol badges to white collars to police badges, these things over time have actually just taken different forms. So when I think of a free black man and I think of the term 3/5 of a man, that's 3 parts of 5. There's 2 parts missing. There's 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, 5/5. 5/5 is whole. So as we go from slave collar to house Negro or white collar to blue collar, which may be lower on the financial spectrum, but you're not working those 60 hours usually. You go home at a certain time. You have a little bit more control of your freedom. And in my imagination, what a 4/5 or a 5/5 of a man would be me almost thinking of evolution of a man. And what being in your full nude skin, free of any, in your full nude skin, free of any occupation, free of any collar, free of any control, comfortable in your nude body, free to wander, to roam, to be. Now there's no financial mention here, but that's what I've realized over time, touching money, not touching money, touching freedom, being contained, what rich and freedom really looks like. And to me, this is a long answer, but the blue collar worker is the closest to a free black man that I see or have seen growing up. I'm looking to create my own destiny and become that 4/5, maybe even that 5/5 of a man by creating my own world. I wake up when I want. I'm 100% present for my kids. I go where I want. I wear what I want. This to me is very, very close to freedom.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Khalik, I'm going to play an excerpt from Black Mother. Do you want to set it up for the audience?
I'm not sure.
No, what is Black Mother about? You know, yeah.
Black Mother is a film that I made about my maternal family's history in Jamaica. Really, it's really about the Jamaica itself. I haven't really seen too many films about Jamaica that are outside of speaking about Rastafarianism or Bob Marley or marijuana. So it was important when I made this film not even to use reggae music in it. You know what I mean? I'm a dual citizen with Jamaica, but I was born in New York, so I have this distance from it. But it's like I'm an outsider, but I'm an insider. You know what I mean? Because I can navigate Jamaica without like a GPS or anything like that. Like I know the rhythm of the island, but at the same time, I'm an American. You know what I mean? So the film was made from a unique perspective, and having been going to Jamaica back and forth since 3 years old, I had accumulated a lot of footage that I dug into when I actually started making this film. So some of it is archival material, but I mean, play it, we could talk.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
With trials and temptation, is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Thank God for that. Thank God for that.
So, Grandpa, it's good to see you again, sir.
Yes, it's good to see you too. Very glad to see you too. Lovely growing young man. Yeah. Glad to see you again. Almighty God and Heavenly Father, thank you for this grandson of mine that has come to look for me in my old age. I thank you for him, dear Lord, and I beseech you to bless him and to keep him, to sustain him. Bless the rest of the family and lead them in the path of righteousness for your own name's sake.
Kama masata, ilo mashende rabasata. You see kama sente rabasata. You see one get more energy.
A black man sell with Mr. Man, African and Nigerian sell with African.
That is undeniable. I'm not denying that.
I am not a Jamaican, sir. Would you listen to me, sir?
Yes.
Would you listen to me?
Yes.
I am not a Jamaican.
Yes.
I am a Ghana Akana Shanti. I am not a Jamaican. Let me finish.
You know, man,
I am not a Jamaican Santa from Kingston.
Yes.
Kingston. Jamaicans can't spell. Let me finish.
Yes.
Because Kingston
Yes.
is Kingston. I am not a Jamaican. I am not a Jamaican. I am a Ghana Akana Shanti from Kingston.
Well,
I'll stop there. You know, when I first told Khalik about Flex, I gave him the most pedestrian context for Flex. I was, it's a show about masculinities. And then immediately he said, well, I have a film called Black Mother that is about black masculinity. And then I said, oh, wait. Actually, Flex is a lot more than that. And it is. Flex posits, it doesn't equate masculinity with the state of being a man. It defines it as a practice, really, that is available to anybody, regardless of gender. So I found it very interesting that it is through the framing of Black Mother that Khalik tells this the film is about a lot of wonderful things, but among them is this wonderful meditation of black masculinity that is framed, at the outset from the title, and when you spend time with the film, you realize that it is through the portal of motherhood, the feminine, that this meditation of black masculinity happens. There are a lot of resonances between this film and Flex, and I wanted to hear you talk a little bit more about this intergenerational dynamic that we have here. It's you visiting your grandfather, and I'm interested to hear about this meditation of masculinity that happens here intergenerationally.
See, that's the thing. Like, I need you to write that, bro. I need a copy of that because sometimes when you're making work, you're not really.
Oh, I understand.
I mean, I'm coming from the chest with my work, but there is a cerebral thing happening as well. But for me, it's so much feeling based. But really, what I was trying to do is, have a contrast, create this contrast in the film that kind of serves as an arc of the film where there's, it's documentary. It's not a narrative film that's written, but even though it's documentary, I'm trying to give it some type of shape, and that comes through an arc in the storytelling. But what I used was to frame the history up against the present day. You know what I'm saying? So, later on in the film, there's a young man who you see speaking to a woman, and he asks her for her number, but the way that he goes about it is kind of crass. It's kind of different than the way that my grandfather explains how he met my grandmother. You see what I'm saying? So, this is a personal film, but it wasn't really solely based just on my family because there's so many people in the film. You know what I mean? But I'm pointing to the oneness and not trying to separate. You know what I mean? I'm pointing to the fact that even Jamaica on the dollar bill, it says, "Out of many come one." So it's a singular film that's really focusing on similarities rather than differences, But me introducing myself into the film was just like by the way of saying, yo, Grandpa, hey, and him giving me that prayer was just to kind of denote who the filmmaker is, because it's important to me when I see documentaries like this that get kind of raw and get kind of maybe confrontational in certain ways to know who made it, like who's the author, you know what I'm saying? Especially if it's a personal film, you know what I mean? And obviously, filmmaking can be so subjective, but I'm making it about a wide topic, so I'm kind of just owning that early on in the film. And then you see me kind of slip back. You don't really hear from me until later when there's a funeral in the film, and you still don't hear me, but you could tell if you remember this scene that that's my grandfather's funeral. So as I mentioned, like going to Jamaica throughout my life and having a camera since the age of 14, I didn't make this film until I was around 31. You see what I'm saying? So I had all this material to dig into, even though I shot it, and I shot new stuff, and it was before 2020, but I did get a bonus in 2020 when George Floyd got murdered. You know what I'm saying? I think every black artist got some paper. You know what I mean? I definitely got paper during that time because a lot of these institutions were like scrambling. Like, yo, we're not representing correctly, or we need somebody to represent. And I don't know, man. I mean, I'm a mixed race person. I've grown up amongst my Jamaican family and I've always identified as a black person. You know what I'm saying? So that's where I'm at. But in Jamaica, for the first week, they may refer to me as white man. Then when I get a 10, now I'm brown man. You know what I'm saying? If I stay a little longer, there's no questions asked. You know what I'm saying? Nah, I'm just joking with y'all. That is true, though. That is true. That is true. But there's a lot of colorism. Even this film is broken down into trimesters, right? Because with that title, Black Mother, and trying to find a structure, I said the best way to kind of like organize it, all of these different subjects, is through trimesters. So the first trimester is what people may expect from Jamaica. People dancing in the street. We're talking about food. We're talking about the fruits, right? Water, the earth. But by the second trimester, now we're speaking about colonialism. We're speaking about the effects of colonialism through the minds of the women when it comes to colorism. And bleaching, skin bleaching, things like that, right? So then it gets progressively deeper, going into more of a spiritual realm, which is really where I wanted to take it from the beginning. But there needed to be that, exposition first before we get there. And what I mean by that is Jamaica got more churches per square mile than any other country in the world. And of course, the religion was given to them, you know what I mean, during slavery. But Africans are naturally a very profoundly spiritual people. So it really doesn't matter what container you give them. It could have been Catholicism, it could have been Judaism, it could have been Islam. And they're still just going to use that as a frame, right, to express like what's in the DNA, you know what I'm saying, of our African spiritual heritage. So the film is about all of those things, man. And obviously I'm a man making that film, so it's coming from a masculine standpoint. You know what I mean? But in my view, masculinity was always more of like a protective thing. Like you take care of people, you protect people. These people who are running the country right now, I don't really regard them as men like that because they don't give a damn. They don't care about you, bro, or about me. And, you know, we know what's going on. Not to get too political, but just to say, man, you know, sometimes we got to get political. And his son's name is Malcolm, so respect.
You know, I began with a picture of Khalik. Let me quickly do this. And as a young boy, and I want us to, this is a work of Robert's that is also in the galleries right now. It's on loan to the museum from the Des Moines Art Center. You know, there is a thematic zone in the show Flex that is titled Proverbial Expression. And it's the section in which you will find Robert's installation. But I want to harp on proverbial expression because it is a particularly Black proverbial expression that inspires this work, Get Out of the Mud. And I found that very, very interesting. That your inspiration for this work, what really prompted, sparked this work was that particular Black proverbial expression. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, get out the mud is a Black expression or term to describe it. Just in basic terms, it's just working through adversity. If you could imagine a child being born in the mud, you got to work and crawl and wiggle up out that. Sometimes it happens easier, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the mud dries and it becomes concrete. Those are some of the plays on this. Plus, when I was walking, always as a kid to school, I would always see dandelions growing in like the cracks of the concrete. And as I got older and I understood like other artists like Tupac and the rose that grew from concrete, these things always played in my mind. So there's a couple flowers to the side coming out the concrete. But this originated too as an expression of joy. All my work isn't so heavy. So I actually had a Black child with a big, huge smile coming out the mud because sometimes on the other side of that mud or that breakthrough is a lot of joy. Usually on the other side of hard work is some kind of reward. Otherwise, it's not good work. And if it's not a reward, it's a great lesson. That to me is good work. A good takeaway. So growing up in the hood, there was a clothing brand. I don't think it's a thing anymore. I don't know if it's still active, but it was called British Knights. And if you wore British Knights in certain hoods, it wouldn't be a good thing. It stood for blood killers, so you shouldn't wear it around any blood neighborhoods or anything like that. So that I grew up in the 90s, so it was a little bit more defined gang activity. Not that times are any different. It was just a little bit more defined. And this piece spoke to me because we've all been fighting a war, maybe not in a specific street gang necessarily, but we are part of the same gang, and we've been fighting a war against another gang. And so that's why I also referenced the World War II helmet in this piece. All the pieces I do, I also reference or photograph people from my own community to break the stereotypes that there are Black people in Iowa. So this is my best friend's son. The piece that I showed earlier is, I don't know his name, but he was some guy, a mechanic from the neighborhood in Des Moines where I'm from. So I try to represent us in the right way. Yeah, Get Out the Mud. This is a whole series that I've done. So, and this has attracted a lot of people, a lot of the celebrity collectors that have been mentioned. This Out the Mud piece really catches people's eyes. Plus, I use Ethiopian coffee grinds, which is where coffee originated. So I approach my practice like hip hop. I'm looking at entendres. I'm looking at layers because I want to hit people with the obvious and I want to hit people with the unknown too. That you got to know if you know. Or if you discover it, you have a moment where you're like, whoa, just like when you hear a good verse in a hip hop song, you're like, wait, let me rewind that. Did you hear that? Because he was saying this and then this and then there's this and that means that. That to me is really good art because that makes you feel something, whether it's a music form, photography form, video form, visual form. I also sprinkle some black mustard seeds in the mud to reference some biblical verses I grew up hearing about life and our people in terms of seeds. So I try to really dig into what that mud is that I'm creating because I'm not using real mud. And I use all found products. So I use sawdust and coffee grinds and these seeds, and I mix it all together and create a mud that has an authentic organic base that really speaks to our foundation too.
We're going to open it up to Q&A soon. I just want to ask you this question, Khalik. What is camera ministry? What is camera ministry?
Yeah, camera ministry is a term that made sense because, you know, I was shooting at nighttime with my photography. We didn't show my photographs, but my photography, I'm shooting in East Harlem at nighttime, just using the incandescent street lights and storefronts. And I've been doing that since maybe 2011. And now with gentrification, like that whole corner that I was photographing is flattened so that they could build condos there. So I'm glad that that work is going to serve as an artifact. But during that time that I was taking those pictures, and now I'm shooting in the daytime because it's easy now. There's no more storefronts for me. But when it was nighttime, I was relying on those storefronts and those certain lights that I memorized how they react on the film. And I would find somebody sometimes in a dark place but want to photograph them and be like, yo, walk with me to the light. You know what I'm saying? But I would say that so frequently, you know what I mean? And at one point, driving home, I'm like, damn, how many people did I tell to walk with me into the light? Because I was really thinking, how many people did I photograph tonight? But then when I thought about it, and I said that to myself, I was like, oh, yo, you got to use that somehow. So that's when I was like, yo, you're a minister with a camera, bro. This isn't even about art for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, seriously, maybe because of how it began as a therapy, right? Really, I used to always think filmmaking was boring, right? I thought photography was boring. Mad boring. Like, what is that? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, as an art form, it wasn't so interesting to me. But then when I had a reason, right, to use filmmaking or photography as kind of like a conduit to express something deeper, then it became purposeful and more meaningful to me. So camera ministry is just kind of my conception of what I do, because really Harlem was a place that I went to get knowledge of self. And the thrift booksellers who were selling books by people like Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization, historians like Ivan Van Sertima, you know, Dr. John Henrik Clark, people like that. Like, I was studying that before becoming a photographer. And, you know, this corner that I'm telling you I've been photographing is on the east side. I'm talking about more like the same street, 125th Street, but further down is much more affluent. You know what I mean? So I felt like I owed it to the people that are allowing me to even document them to focus on the light. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of darkness that you could get caught up in. But I'm saying focus on the light. Look beyond the veil of the material body, which could be so easy to judge. You know what I'm saying? And try to go beyond judgment and make this more of a spiritual practice. So, you know, that's why I call it that. You know, not to get carried away with it, but like I said, in my conception of it, that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I think it's very much alive in your films as well. I you know, there is this constant contrast, as I think we saw, between light and dark, that is really powerful. Questions? Yes.
Here, I can give you a mic.
Sure. Thank you. Both of you are really heavily engaged in your community when it comes to making your practice come alive. And I'm curious as to how you facilitate those community-based collaborations. And like an extension of that question would be, to emerging artists working within the context of African diaspora, like myself, how can we continue to emphasize community engagement, really bringing art and access to it to people who are traditionally excluded from these spaces, but also like bringing a really fresh and sustainable touch to this practice?
Who wants to start?
Man, that's not an easy one, but it's an important one. I wish I had a one-size-fits-all answer, but we're black in Iowa, so we don't have a good start. I just suggest to creatives, especially black creatives, I'm answering your question maybe backwards, but I'm born and raised in Iowa, and I've established in the last 5 years a very strong national and global community. 90% of my community and followers are black. Very intentional with that. I'm not anti-white, I'm just so pro-black because I've lived in Iowa my whole life. So as a creative, creating things that are specific to my identity, which I paint black art, I create black art. That's what I'll always will create. Where's my audience? That was a question I had to ask myself. Where is my audience? Where's my audience on a broad scale? Where is my audience locally? Kind of finding your tribe. You have to play both, especially being in Iowa. We don't have as much of an ecosystem unless we are creating it. That's where I give you a hybrid answer to say you have to look local and you have to look abroad. What you can't find local, my advice is, because this is what we have to do in Des Moines too, and you're in Iowa City, this is next biggest thing pretty much. You have to create it. You have to create it. If what you want isn't there, you have to create it. And if you don't feel like it's returning what you need, you have to find more people that want something similar to what you want. Because it's easier to build something together than by yourself. At the same tone, I give very strong advice. There's a lot of black folks in the world. There are a lot more outside of the state than there are in this state. I found a lot of success working outside in versus inside out. Where a lot of artists or creatives get stuck in this state, I can only speak for this state, but I would imagine they're underdeveloped markets is what I'd say, or less active creative markets, less diverse creative markets, is they work inside out. That can still be successful. It's just a longer path. It takes longer. If you work outside in and a little inside out, but more outside in, you're going to find more of your people that are aligned with you outside, and I have tons of support because I've found who my tribe is. But you got to find that recipe, and the way you find that recipe is you take a sample of a few people that you think are your tribe, and then you try to use marketing and different business strategies to target that persona. If they like this, this, and this, then you try to find how you can get your thing that you already know people that like this, this, and this are buying or embracing, find more like that. For me, it was actually HBCUs. I got super lucky because I was trying to market my work on Instagram, and all I was getting when I would advertise to black art and black communities and black magazines was a lot of love, but no transactions, no conversions. So I needed to understand where my black communities were that were a little more affluent and had the place in their life to be able to afford or understand the value in investing in art. HBCUs seem to have a constant, deep-rooted commitment to our own people, especially those of your same school or college or university. So the Howard folks mess heavy with the Howard folks, the Hampton folks mess heavy with the Hampton folks. But once you started in those networks, and I'm just using this as an example, it spread like wildfire because they're very open to sharing their resources. The reason I'm giving you such a long answer is because this is such an important answer for creatives, and I hear this a lot, but no one seems to understand there's a recipe You may cook different, but there's actually a recipe to make this successful.
Yeah, great answer. I totally agree, man. Like it's hard because I would suggest the first thing is just to like love whatever you do, you know what I'm saying? Because it's not going to be easy. It's like somebody comes to me with a film idea sometimes, like a student. I'm like, all right, make sure that you really, really are willing to commit to that idea because it could take 3 to 5 years to make that film. You know, I remember like working with Wu-Tang and feeling like, yo, this is cool because of course I was a big rap fan, and to be playing chess with RZA, right, that was a blessing. But I remember going into the studio. They had a mansion in New Jersey, and I go down into the studio, and it was 20 guys my age. We were all about 18, 19, 20, right? And I just realized, like, I got to get out of here, right? Because I can't come under the umbrella of Wu-Tang and be my own artist. I'm always going to be affiliated with that as long as I kind of like try to use that to validate me, like using their fame to kind of prop me up in a type of way. So after that, I went off and did my own thing, you know what I'm saying, and remained friends with GZA, but you know, it wasn't the same. It wasn't like I was asking them to do anything for me. But at that point, it became about just doing the work, like making a film. The first film I made, I mean, I put it on YouTube for free. That film was living on YouTube for a couple of months, and I get an email from J. Cole. And I'm like, damn, like, yo, he's like, yo, my girl saw your film and showed it to me, and we should work together at some point. And just last October, we worked together for his album, The Fall Off. So we were laughing about it when we met in person after over 10 years, because it was like, you know, but that would have never happened unless I believed in myself. So the first thing you need, I call it a by myself meeting. That's when you have a meeting by yourself. You know what I'm saying? And you sit down with a notepad and you declare to yourself, I'm going to do this. And you speak with a type of conviction about what you want to do, right? And then you begin to do it. And application is much greater than theory, right? You can't just have a great idea. You need to begin to apply that. And when you begin to see the results of that, other people will start believing in you all of a sudden, because you're actually doing what you said you would do. So there's really no, you can't disqualify somebody who you see building something. You know what I mean? So first you got to build it. It's like, what's that movie? Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Kevin Costner. Watch that.
You know they filmed that in Iowa, right?
Oh, what? Damn. That's deep. That's deep. I didn't know. That's deep. Thank you.
Akeem is an MFA student here. So, you know, and I think part of how you guys conceive, and I can also speak to this because, you know, I did get my MFA here. Part of how you both have conceived about how you've conceived the trajectory of your career, I think, is because you were not hampered by these dictates of, you know, an institution. I do very much believe that. And I appreciate that question, Akeem, because, you know, I'm always interested in, and I'm speaking personally, you know, I have asked myself a few times how perhaps I may have hampered myself. I'm very happy that I got the MFA. I'm very happy that, you know, I, to some degree, followed the dictates of institution. But sometimes I have wondered what freedoms I have denied myself in terms of, you know, really deciding the trajectory of my career because I was so wedded to the dictates of institution, and this is how it's done. This is the next step. So I really appreciate both of your answers because I think being in this bubble, sometimes we don't think about that entrepreneurial instinct that you guys are speaking to. And I think it's very important because we want careers. We want careers as artists. Of course, the art comes first, but we also want careers as artists, and some of that responsibility has to fall on us. And it is about building community. It is about finding that audience that I don't think we always. And I think this is true. I experienced this, and I think, a lot of people in the MFA world, the institutionalized world, will say this, that like sometimes we're even afraid to tap into that entrepreneurial instinct because it's to some degree frowned upon. Yeah.
Can I say something just very brief to that? I'm 42 years old. I've been a full-time artist for 5 years. All the white paper studies, all the research I did, a lot of successful people discovered and found their success in their mid-40s, late 30s. If you find that earlier, congratulations. If you don't, I'm giving you some hope and some courage past 40, into 50, into 60, that the way I have a delusional belief in myself, I always have. I also have a delusional belief in humans. It's to a fault, because y'all have let me down plenty of times. But I believe that if you are a responsible human and take care of your responsibilities, even if you've put yourself into a career track or a less entrepreneurial track, if you keep that entrepreneurial spirit alive, that inner child, and you have time to play, this goes back to your comment about making sure it's something you love. If you make time to play, just even on the side, that's how my play and hobby became a full-time career. I painted every day. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I did it in between conference calls. I did that at age 37. I've made more connections, more experiences. I didn't even have a passport before I started painting. I've been to multiple countries now. I could go on and on. I say all this humbly because, to be honest, it still doesn't feel real. But I encourage, I implore everyone to always try something. Because even as you become into elder years, this will keep you alive. If it doesn't give you success, if it doesn't give you another chapter, it's going to give you something that you can love forever. So when I sat down and was like, oh, I'm about to give up addiction. I'm about to give up alcoholism. I'm not good enough at golf. I'm not good enough at basketball to get paid. What's something I can do forever that I love? This is literally where this started. I wasn't thinking about I already had a job. I thought that corporate job was my forever. I was just trying to replace addictions with something healthier. And I wanted it to be something I actually liked doing.
One last question. Oh, there are two. Okay, we're going to take two. We're going to go a little over. That means you might not get a chance to see Flex, but you have to come back if you haven't. I know a lot of you have already seen it, so.
Peace, fellas. How y'all doing? My name is Mamadou Khalik. Peace. As black artists, I'm curious, how do you guys, I guess, maintain a level of groundedness and, ability to stay grounded with the next work, when I feel like a lot of black artists, myself included, struggle with the pressure of when you create something, making that the magnum opus. This is my this is the best work I created. How can I top this? And so I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional thinking about this, but just for you guys, how do you guys keep that level of keep going with the work, not letting the work define you, or letting the latest work, define who you are, you feel me? How do you guys keep getting to the next one, to the next project with a level of groundedness, but yeah.
Stay off of social media, man. You know what I mean? I think social media right now, the way that, psychologically our egos, what they do when we kind of compare, listen, originality doesn't compete. That's something that I realized, that if you're doing something that's original, right, who is it in competition with, right? Because it can't be compared to anything. So I feel like, look inward first and decide what you want to bring forward, right? But look inward for something that's unique to you, like your own fingerprint, your own original viewpoint, your own perspective, right? And then bring that forward to the world, right? And it doesn't got to be a magnum opus. Sometimes, you don't got to make whatever, just you could do a short film. You don't even got to do a feature film. Sometimes, like now, for me personally, when I'm going to go take pictures, and I've had exhibitions throughout the world, right? But I don't wear that pressure when I'm shooting, right? I just think about getting into the flow state, right? And kind of like not thinking too much. Me personally, I like to meditate and kind of ground myself in the morning anyway. And ultimately, man, when, through the spiritual perspective, you realize that, the material body that you have temporarily is not really yourself. This is just something that is like a communication device while you're on the earth for a certain amount of time, 80 years, 90 years, whatever it may be. So if you don't put too much value on it, then you won't value also some of the accolades and some of the other stuff, all the material possessions that now you can purchase, because, you know what I mean? Like, so I stay grounded in that sense personally. And for me, it was a trip because I take photographs around such an impoverished area in East Harlem, but that work has been exhibited in very posh places in France. So then when I come back to the hood to take pictures, I have to think, all right, how am I representing, right? Or how is this gonna have a positive impact? You know what I'm saying? And to be honest, beyond me being there to kind of like serve as somewhat of a therapist to somebody that maybe want to speak to me for 30 minutes and just kind of offering my ear to them or helping them out with some money, I don't know. You know what I mean? I think maybe people could see the work and kind of infer different things that could help them, or maybe help them not to judge other people as well, or to see the value in people that they thought would value this. You know what I'm saying? Because, one of my subjects is somebody that you will see in Harlem sleeping in a puddle of urine. You know what I mean? But the average person will be afraid of them. But then if somebody sees that depicted in a palatable way, then now it becomes what we call art, right? But for me, personally, I grew up studying, like I said, Malcolm X, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, you know what I mean? It came up through the Nation of Islam by way of the 5% Nation. So my outlook is not like the way that people always interpret it, you know what I mean? And I'm not always holding the audience's hand either. So I've dealt with criticism, I've dealt with people completely misunderstanding my intention, I've dealt with people projecting a bunch of ideas that I didn't even really have when I made the work, but that's just what it is. Like, you gotta kind of be able to deal with that and still not lose who you are, and then still not react as if what you interpreted was real and then lash out in the type of way either. So weed helps, man. Like, it helps, to be honest, but at the end of the day, man, listen, you gotta love it. You gotta love it.
One last question. They're okay. But I think Oba had his hand up. It might be a quick one, and then we'll try to slip you in. Yeah, Oba. Yeah.
Oh, sweet. I wanted to ask, what does being black mean to you within America, and also outside of America? And another question is, when people look at your work, what is one word that you want them to describe your work or take away from your work? Like, how do you define your work, one word? Yeah.
Oh, I said one question.
Oh, yeah. My bad.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. That one died too? Okay. I feel like being black is the closest thing to God. I describe the black woman as the closest thing to home. That's how I see us. I see us as kings and queens. I see us as storytellers. I see us as vessels of the truth. One word for my artwork, emotion. I'm a storyteller more than anything. I just use the visual channel, the visual medium. If you don't feel something from my work, I missed. That's a miss to me. I want you to be pissed. I want you to say you hate it. I want you to say you love it. I want you to cry. I need some feeling. Same as what I feel like people get from abstraction. You have to feel what you can't necessarily see clearly.
Definitely, I look at it similarly. Like, you know, black people are the most lied about people in the world, especially like through the lens of being violent or, you know, thugs and all of these type of things that you know people conceive of when you read the comments on certain things like Usual Suspects or like, you know, the new age people, the younger people see the racism, you know what I mean, that's, you know what I mean, prevalent in social media also, but that comes through ignorance. Like when you really understand what it means to be black, that means to be original. You know what I mean? Black people literally invented the wheel. You know what I mean? Literally discovered fire. You know what I'm saying? We're the first to do that. Like when you understand the history of black people, you also understand that you can't depend on white people to teach it to you. You understand? Because as a child in second grade, the first thing you learn is that you were a slave. So your self-esteem gets knocked down immediately. And for me, just a little anecdote, you know what I mean? When I was in fourth grade, I had a girlfriend. Her name was Evelyn Campbell, and she was beautiful. Evelyn Campbell, never forget, you know what I'm saying? But I was fast as a kid because I'm half Jamaican. So during the fun run, I would beat everybody. And there was another brother in the class, his name was Mark Mann. And he said, yo, you're black, yo. I know you're black. And I'm like, yeah, I'm black. So he told Evelyn, and Evelyn's dad made us break up. So I remember being on the monkey bars during recess and having a by myself meeting and being like, yo, I'm gonna become Nat Turner. You know what I'm saying? Nah, I'm just kind of going for, I'm just messing with y'all, but you get the point. But that's what it means for me. So then as a black artist, it's like, you gotta just go into your experience. Like one of my favorite photographers is Gordon Parks. So when you read Gordon Parks' autobiographies, especially if you get a chance to read A Choice of Weapons, his whole life is about his experience as a black man in a world. He was the first black photographer for Life magazine. So oftentimes as a black person, you got to be a trailblazer too. You know what I mean? And kind of make a way for another person. You know what I mean? In a way, Basquiat made room for you. In a way, you're making room for somebody else too. And room is not the right word. I'd rather say inspiration. You're giving somebody else that torch, that baton to carry. You know what I mean? So it's complicated. One word to describe my art. Love. It is love. That's really what it comes down to. It's not romantic love. It's think about the word inspiration, right? The word spirit, wherever you find that, whether it's a prefix or suffix, it means breath. Like spirit means breath, or a spiral, right? Or respiration, to breathe. If something is expired, the breath is taken out, now it's dead. But inspiration is to be in the spirit. So as an artist, you have to be in the spirit. You know what I mean? So it's a spiritual thing, what you're doing as an artist, right? It's not just for the material world to make money, although we're glad when we can make money from our work, right? Because it's so hard anyway. But at least we feel free, like he was talking about freedom earlier. But one word, yeah, love, man. That's all. I know that sounds generic, but really that's what it is, you know?
Thank you. I wish we could keep going on and on, but unfortunately, we have to be out of here because we close at 4:30. We can chit chat with each other, but we need to clear the